Water on a lotus leaf is extremely unsteady. So also is life very unstable. Understand that the entire world, consumed by disease and conceit, is smitten with sorrow. So what this is, again, cautioning us against is a sense of complacency. So define complacency here as unquestioning acceptance of something. The thing that this verse is pointing at is your life in general. So what are we complacent about? What do we unquestioningly take for granted or accept that our existence in the next moment is assured? And the next moment after that, and after that, and after that. What we don't realize is that our life, our existence, is extremely unsteady. And the analogy he beautifully gives is of water on a lotus leaf. So if you've ever seen those large lotus leaves floating on the surface of a pond, there's a greasy surface on the top of the lotus leaf, and the water beads up. All it takes is a ripple on the surface of the pond, a gust of wind to come along, and that drop of water, plop, it's off the leaf and it's back in the water now. Our life is floating, resting on the surface of the leaf. All it takes is a gust of wind and we're gone. Our news programs are filled with these stories of a sudden accident. Now, someone's driving perfectly down the road, safe, correct speed, and someone else loses control and they're gone. Or a young person is struck with a particular disease. Whatever it is, there's this notion that our life is unsteady. Again, this is not necessarily a pessimistic view. What it's saying is recognize that your life is not guaranteed in the next moment, tomorrow. It's by recognizing that we start to value it. The danger of complacency is that we stop valuing something. It'll always be there. Now, this has been a discussion, rightly or wrongly, in the last few years around, for example, social stability or the stability of a democratic process or social freedoms. People fight hard for their freedoms and they establish those freedoms. And then the next generation is born into that environment with those freedoms. You take them for granted. It's only when you realize the struggle and the effort that went into gaining those freedoms that you realize the value. When those freedoms are put at risk, now you start to value them. How do they get put at risk in the first place? We complacently expected that they'll always be here. And so we didn't do the necessary work to sustain them, to maintain them. Material wealth is another good example of this. Generation 1 is born poor, they work hard and they make a lot of money. Generation 2 is born into that wealth, but they recognize what their parents did to get there, so they have a value for it. Generation 3 is born into the wealth again, and they are further removed from all of the hard work and all of the hardship and all of the poverty that preceded it, and so they take the wealth for granted. Generation 1 creates the wealth, Generation 2 enjoys the wealth, Generation 3 squanders the wealth. Why? Complacency. So despite this sounding pessimistic, It's just pointing at the tendency for us to become complacent around anything. Again, the mind gets involved, attached, generates expectations. Recognize that your life is as unsteady and unstable as water on a lotus leaf. So the moment you value something, you won't put it at risk. Or to put it another way, if you put something at risk, it indicates you don't value it. Understand that the entire world consumed by disease and conceit is smitten with sorrow. So in terms of avoiding complacency, there's a couple of other examples that you may be familiar with. The phrase memento mori, Latin, it means remember you will die. So the purpose of this phrase is not to threaten yourself, not to bring in a sense of pessimism, but to remember that your days are numbered. There's an interesting exercise which I've heard explained. Find out what your life expectancy is for your age, for your geographical location, for your gender. Multiply that by 12 and that gives you the number of months that you can expect to live. Now go onto some computer program and create a number of circles that correspond with that number of months, and then colour in all the months you've already lived. It's a visual representation of how much you've lived and how much you can expect to continue to live. Every month, on the first of the month or the last of the month, cross off another circle. What this does is it brings into sharp relief the limited, finite number of days we have. The idea is to inspire us to use our time effectively. Which means doing what? What does it mean to use your time effectively? What would this text tell you is the effective use of your time? Seek the self, seek the self, seek the self, O foolish mind. At the destined time, mundane activity never indeed would save you. At the destined time, time of your passing. Remember that you will pass. So there's a similar idea in the Christian Bible and Psalms. So, teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. Saying the same thing. Recognize that your days are numbered so that you can make wiser choices. So he also says, the entire world consumed by disease and conceit is smitten with sorrow. So again, this is not designed as a pessimistic attitude that we should be adopting. It's another way of looking at the nature of human life. It's again an intellectual re-evaluation. So what this is doing is not changing your perspective. It's not switching out one perspective for another. Oh, I thought the world was, basically a happy place where we're all, enjoying our lives. Apparently I'm wrong. It's all smitten with disease, conceit and sorrow. Okay, now I know the truth. It's not changing perspectives, it's integrating a new perspective. If you look at your life, you will see that there is disease all the way along. There is conceit, negative mindsets, negative mental states, and sorrow. This is baked into the cake of being human. Recognize that and accept that. Integrate that truth into what you understand about human life. rather than expecting I should always be happy all the time. Happiness, the kind that I see on my Instagram feed, everyone seems to be experiencing all the time. I should have access to that all the time. So any kind of disease, conceit, or sorrow that I experience is something wrong. No. It's built into the human experience. If you've been there for the series of talks on the Prophet, he talked about that on the discussion on love. For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. So understanding the nature of human experience as necessarily including sorrow is a way of accepting it. The way to accept something is to make a careful observation and analysis of it, without bias, without hope or expectation. Let me just see what I'm dealing with. And it's in that framework of acceptance that we find peace. We accept the disease and the sorrow. It doesn't mean we seek it. It simply means that we don't resist it. It means that while we are enjoying health and joy, we're not in some kind of delusion. We allow ourselves to experience the health and the joy because we know at some point in life there'll be disease and sorrow. So let me enjoy it now. It's when we forget that there is disease, sorrow, and ultimately death that we lose the value of health, joy, and life. Memento mori.